Well, welcome everyone. We'll call to order this meeting of the Finance Committee. Bill, would you start with the roll call, please?
Yes. Wilkos.
Here.
Jackson.
Here.
And Iro.
Here.
Lorman.
Here.
All present.
All right, thank you. First item of business is the approval of the minutes of our meeting on November 7th, 2023. Does anybody have corrections or changes to make to the minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor, or sorry, never mind. Hearing no changes, the minutes as circulated are approved. Moving on to the audit of the bills. Bill, do you have any updates for us?
Yeah, I have one late addition this time. That is an invoice for TAPCO, which is for traffic signal parts. The amount is $277.02.
TAPCO for how much?
$277.02.
77.02. Can we get a motion to approve the audit of the bills with that one addition?
So move.
Thank you. Second?
This is Jackson. I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the audit of the bills to be paid with the addition of $277.02 for TAPCO, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Moving on to agreements and contracts, we have one, and it is the request from Capital Ice for modification of the agreement for lease of the hockey facility at 2616 Pleasant View Road. And Don, you're here to, do we want to get a few minutes from Don to explain, or Bill?
Yeah, I can give a real brief introduction and then perhaps we could hear from Don. So the city has an existing lease agreement with Capital Ice LLC that was approved in 1999. That's when the original Capital Ice facility was constructed, and that lease agreement had a 30-year term with an automatic 10-year extension. Under the terms, the city provided the land for the facility. Capital Ice paid for and constructed the facility, which was conveyed to the city. That is currently tax exempt as a city-owned property, but there is a lease agreement between the city and Capital Ice specifying the uses for the facility, that it would be used for ice hockey and other related activities. There's also a calculation embedded in the lease for rent payments, but that rent is based on distributable cash. And as that cash is reinvested in the facility or for repairs, those amounts have been very small. And in recent years, there's been no payment under that formula that was in that agreement. Capital Ice has been looking at expanding the facility and potentially constructing a third sheet of ice. They had some initial discussions with staff about whether TIF could be used for that, but with the property not being taxable and this not really falling within the city's project plan or TIF policy, the answer was that the TIF likely would not be able to support that. And the Capital Ice has looked at other options, and they have made a request that they would like to have the city consider what they're referring to as a reverse lease of providing the property and the facility to them and allowing them to proceed privately with construction of a third sheet. At this point, this is just an introduction. First look at this item. Included in your packet are the letter from Mr. Goodweiler, the current lease agreement, and Don is here to speak to the request and answer questions.
Essentially, the agreement we entered in back in 1999 worked for both the city and for Capital Ice. We needed a little bit room on the cash flow end of it to be able to operate the rink. The city was interested in having the rink as an amenity to the city. So the city got a rink, and Capital Ice got a place for both the Middleton youth and Capital Ice, our capital teams, to play. The lease agreement was going to allow us, once we got the mortgage paid off, was going to allow us to then have a lease payment go to the city and a return of capital to the people who invested in Capital Ice. The problem is we got to the end of 20 years and we needed to do an improvement, and the improvement ran into almost as much as what it costs us to originally lease the building to build the building was $3.3 million. So we've paid off a little over $500,000 on that. But it's come to our attention, the agreement as it was and helped both sides 23 or 24 years ago is not functioning well as far as making a revenue source for the city. And you can imagine how difficult it is for us to go out and try to find financing to do improvements when we don't own the building and we don't own the land. We have a piece of paper that is a lease agreement. So for us to attract additional investors in the property, for us to be able to expand the property, we really need to have it back in our name. That's going to create a situation where it'll go back on the property tax rolls and the city will get a revenue stream from the property tax. We'll get a better opportunity for financing, a better opportunity to attract investors. And we've got a couple of things that are coming up. One is the Middleton Youth Hockey and Middleton High School Hockey are looking for a third sheet of ice. For that to happen, the most reasonable way of doing that, my guess is it would cost them $6 or $7 million to build a single sheet of ice somewhere else in the city. And then they'd have to duplicate the management and all of the other things. And then they're a group that their leadership passes on virtually every year. They have a new board and a new group of people to try to run and operate. So they're both in favor of having it at Capital Ice so that we could manage. We're in favor of being one of the largest contributors to the project in the terms of cash. When we built the rink, we oversized the compressor facilities, and we already have 2 Zambonis. We could buy a third Zamboni. So there's the economy of scale. There's the advantage of not having to duplicate management in other positions. So we would be in favor of that, but it's just not possible for us to go out and do that without the ownership being reversed. So we thought we'd fly that over and see what we can do. And if the city is in favor and we're in favor, begin to take your guidance and tell us how we need to proceed and get this done.
Thanks, John. 1 second, Larry, just so the members know, we're not asked to take any action tonight. We're just having a discussion about this. So does anyone have any questions? And we'll start with our esteemed city attorney, Larry.
Don, where is the third rink located? I mentioned that because I know there was discussion previously about a third rink and it was not located in the city.
It will be located in the city. It'll be on the south side parking lot. And it'll take up about 2/3 of that parking lot. Currently, we have a parking agreement with our neighbors to the north and also with ETC. So about the only time we have parking that is pushed is during our USHL games, and there was during the WIAA state finals, there were some days there where the parking was, part of that was because WIAA tried to get a 20-minute or 30-minute time between segments or between sessions. And it just wasn't possible to get everybody out, get the parking people out of the parking lot, then people park back in and then come back in and get their tickets. Also, they didn't want to sell any tickets in advance. They didn't want to have reserved seating. So people came early because that was the only way they were going to get the seat they wanted. So I think we've got some of that ironed out, but for the most part, we've been seating 2,600 people on our sellout days, and parking is not our number one problem. We very seldom use all the parking that's available to us. So if we lost some on the south side of the building, I think we would still be fine.
Second question I have is, what assurance is there that ownership of the facility would not be converted into a tax exempt that would not pay property taxes? Since, as you point out, the entity basically breaks even every year. It's not a money-making venture for profit of the people who run it.
You could put that right in the whatever agreement we come up with. You could put that right in the agreement. We would agree to that. There's no advantage to us to make it tax exempt.
The third question I have relates just to the basic question of consideration. Normally, when the city considers whether to part ownership with a piece of land, it goes out and gets an appraisal and figures out what the property is worth. And as I understand your proposal tonight, it would be that the city would simply turn over title to the property without paying the city anything for the value of the land upon which the hockey facility sits. Is that correct?
That is correct. And that is the way it would have been had we decided to pay property tax in 1999. The city was prepared to give the land. That was part of this project that we entered into. The
Right.
city's
As you pointed out, it was mutual benefit.
Yes.
But it doesn't look so mutual when the city no longer has an ownership interest in the land. Let me see. I think I have one or two others here. No, I think I can let go now. Open some doors.
Any other questions? Alder Wilkes? Oh,
Okay, thank you. My question was basically when the last time it was assessed, if it's been since 1999, if there's been any sort of, what kind of tax are we
Yeah,
looking
I
at?
don't believe that there has been any assessment during that time period. I have asked our city assessor to take a look at this and try to come up with an estimate of where it might be assessed at. I don't have that information available yet.
Thank you. And then my one other question would be the third sheet, is that to be owned? It's to be owned by Capital Ice and leased out for the exclusive use of the school district and the youth hockey, or is it to be part under your ownership to be leased as you see fit?
We would have an agreement with Middleton Youth and the high school in terms of, we've told them they're in the process now of giving us their wish list.
Okay.
We're prepared to do about somewhere between a fourth and a third of the of the monies to go in would come from us.
Mhm.
They're not prepared to manage the facility. So they would be putting in basically 2/3 of the thing through fundraising.
Okay.
And then we would manage it, but if they want to put Middleton rink on it, if they want to paint it red, they just have to, they have to give us their wish list, and they sent out a questionnaire to their membership saying, what things should we be asking for in this agreement if we were to go forward? So we want to know up front. There's been talk about it over the years. We've got, I don't know, 20-some thousand dollars in engineering fees that we've already paid for, and we don't even know if it's going to happen, because it's dependent on their ability to. They say they can fundraise, but whether they really can fundraise or not is not. We are not offering up a position on our board or as a committee. We'll have an agreement with them, and that's how we'll operate between us. We've been operating together for 23 years there's always going to be some marital problems, but very little. Yes, sir.
And you said you have about 1.5 million already paid up?
No.
Okay.
No. Our ownership said if Middleton raises X number of dollars, we'd have to see what, we'd have to get
I
the
mean, how much
cost.
money do you have now?
How much money do I have? What?
So to invest in this, if you were, to raise, how much capital do you have to put into this? If
Somewhere between 1.5 and $2 million.
that's what you have
That's
right
what
now.
we pledged. If that were the terms of the, I mean, if we got it and we could build it for $6 million, they would have to raise 4 million. We've asked them to raise 5 million, and
you would come up with.
then we'll come up with
1.5.
somewhere depending on what it's going to cost. We don't know if it's going to cost 5.5 million or 6 million.
Well, yeah, but. Yeah,
We do know it's double what
Yeah.
we originally built 2 sheets of ice for.
Sure.
It's more than double of that.
Oh, yeah, right, inflation and all that. I get that part. So you need $5.5 million to $6 million to do this project.
Mhm.
It's obviously just physically attached to the current building.
Physically attached to the current building.
Existing property and infrastructure.
Mhm.
You have some of the infrastructure in place, so. Gotcha.
I have a question for Bill, and you may not know the answer to this. In your cover sheet, you talked about conveying ownership of just the building to Capital Ice. And in reviewing the lease, that was an obligation anyway. And even though I drafted the lease in 1999, I don't remember whether we did a bill of sale for the building. Have you checked your records to see if we have? I can check mine too, but
I have not come across that in any of my files. I can check with Lori and anything that might have been in the vault and see if I can find it, but I
yeah,
have not.
because it wouldn't be recorded as a bill of sale. Do you remember, Don?
I looked and I cannot find it.
Okay.
I do not recall having signed that piece of paper.
No, you wouldn't have had to.
Okay.
It'd be a city conveyance
Yeah.
by bill of sale of the completed
Mhm.
building to Capital Ice. That was an obligation
Right.
under the lease.
Right.
And I would guess we did. I don't know why we wouldn't, but it was 1999.
It was 1999.
So
Alder
just-
Lorman, did you have, oh, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, if I could just follow up on that question, Larry. So my understanding was that Capital Ice constructed the facility and was to convey the facility to the city through a bill of sale. That's how I'm reading
might have it
paragraph 5.
backwards. You're right. So actually it was Capital Ice was supposed to convey it by bill of sale back to the city. Sorry.
Yeah, and I know, on the parcel records that the property, land and improvements is listed under city ownership currently. So the idea I was floating out in the cover memo, and I had also mentioned this to Don when we had met with him, is, perhaps there would be an option where the city could convey the facility to Capital Ice, retain ownership of the land, and enter into a new long-term lease agreement for the land. I'd let Don to speak to whether or not that would work with their financing, but that might be another option for us to explore.
That would be the least favorite of ours. I've already gone to the banks and said, well, what happens if I don't own the land and I have a long-term lease? And I was told that would be very tricky to do from our being able to finance things. So we would certainly prefer the clear-cut deal. You get the property tax, we get the building and the land.
Not understanding the full history of this, that sounds like a lopsided deal for 4 acres of land. I could be wrong. Maybe,
I'm sorry.
I said from where I sit, which is not with 40 years of experience on this, or since 1999, it sounds to me like that would be a lopsided deal.
Except for the fact that we're not getting anything for this right now. At least you'd be getting taxes.
True. But we don't know what the taxes would be.
Right.
And I bet they're less than the purchase price of 4 acres.
Right.
Larry, I had a question about the current agreement on page 13 of the packet, the section on liens. says capital agrees not to create or to permit others to create any lien against the premises as a result of the making of any repairs, any construction, or the installation of any fixtures, materials, or equipment. So that kind of sounds like they couldn't use the property, the premises as collateral if they wanted to get.
Well, you're right, but that clause was really directed at construction liens.
Yeah.
Which, you know, we have a comparable situation at the airport with the hangars. And we've had issues in the past with hangar owners who put mortgages on city land without our consent. And that gets to be a problem. But, you know, the same thing can happen with a construction lien. You know, if you hire a contractor to build something and you don't pay the contractor, first thing they're going to do is slap a lien on the land. And this clause was intended to avoid that problem.
So I probably have a question for Larry. You know, I always like to think worst case scenario down the road, not, you know, gratification right now. So say it's a perfect world and they come up with $6 million and it's yours now. And but something goes through in the future. You just can't pay off you can't pay it off. And now you default. Now that property is left vacant. So now someone else can just come along and buy it and redevelop it. And the city has, obviously, we've lost all interest and control in that property like any other property in the business park. As opposed to current situation where we have, obviously, the city owns it. We're not making money on it right now, but and I guess the question is, are we ever going to get any revenue from it in its current state? Maybe not. Okay, so that's the agreement.
No, because if we put this expansion in, that's going to add another 20 years on top of the thing now. And the likelihood is that at $6 million for one sheet of ice to try to amortize that, there's never going to be much of a cash excess.
Okay.
So you're going to be out. I haven't gotten a nickel out of this. My partner, Ryan Suter, has not gotten a nickel out of this.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's a service to the city.
Right.
I understand that.
And we, as a facility, we don't just, it's not just a ice rink out in the middle of something. We have tournaments and we have events where we bring in, the last time we took a count, it was over 7,700 sleeping night rooms.
Oh, no, I totally get it. We have an airport that people question the same value.
Mhm.
You know, the city owns it, and where are we making money off this thing? Well, it's what it attracts. It's other elements of it. So I totally get it. But I'm just again thinking down the road. So now that we've opened up the can of worms, is there an opportunity here for the city to get revenue? That sounds intriguing. Especially if it's tax dollars. And so it's turned over to you and you have at it and the city gets tax revenue. And if it
I'm
fails,
assuming we're going to still have some type of an agreement with you folks. And that would be part of what all we're going to be talking about as we go forward here.
yeah, I mean, I totally get it. So I mean, we have a public pool. It doesn't make the city any money. It simply adds value to the city. We have all kinds of things like that. So in hockey, and I couldn't agree more. Having a hockey arena is an asset to the development of our youth.
I want you to know, Don, that I think we all agree the ice rinks are an asset to the city. You know, we're not calling that into question.
Yeah.
I guess to follow the airport analogy or the swimming pool analogy, we still own the land. And so I'm wondering, could we, like the airport or the golf course, retain ownership and actually use city funds to pay for at least some of the renovation to add the third rink and create an enterprise fund for Capital Ice. That's what we have for the golf course, for the airport, our utilities, the funds and their enterprises. They're supposed to act like a business. So I think I would be, whatever the solution is, I would be most comfortable with the city retaining the property, ownership of the property. Because I do, we have to look ahead 20, 30 years. And that is I'm sure, a valuable piece of property for which the property taxes that you all would be paying would maybe not compare to what other uses might generate. But I think this is a good beginning discussion. I would like to have the council come back to this at some point. I don't know if it's Brian, would you suggest this for a committee of the whole meeting discussion next year, or?
I think we could, depending on what information we get back from the assessor on a potential valuation of the property. I think that's a key piece of information.
I would say that one piece is very key to the discussion that we're having right now. If you're thinking much bigger than that, you're looking at a lot more financials that we would need to know, including, I think if enterprise fund is something that we would want to consider, we would need to know a lot more financials than just the assessments. I think that's pretty obvious. So I think if that's what you would like to suggest or put forward, then that's a bigger, I think, ask.
Well, I think it's an option worth adding to the list.
It's a long list right now.
What?
I'm just thinking of all the things on the committee of the whole list.
Yeah. Well, no, it doesn't have to be the one in January.
Right.
Yeah, because it would take more time to.
Right. And that's also my thought is that, I mean, this is obviously something that we're just starting the discussions on now. I understand that having an answer would help to move the process along, because a third ice time is valuable time. Like, it's in high demand in the city of Middleton. And I know that there's people that would love to have it. So having a third rink would help.
Right.
Sorry.
Just a question for Don. Ballpark, what's the cost, or sorry, what's the time frame for construction of a third sheet for, rough numbers from shovel in the ground to ribbon cutting?
We could probably do ice, as far as sellable ice, without the facility being completely done. So would we have, when we first opened Capital Ice, we didn't have bleachers.
Yeah.
We didn't have mezzanine. We didn't have weightlifting facility. We didn't have hardly anything, but we opened it up, we sold ice. So 6 to 8 months, but it's really out farther than that in the fact that right now it's going to take about 6 months to get steel. So you got to do the 6 months to get the steel. And then once you get the steel, you got another 6 months, 6 to 8 months on top of that for construction. We did complete, and it is now 100% go on a DeForest facility. We'll have 2 sheets of ice over there. We're going to have an indoor sheet as part of that overall project, and we'll have 1 outdoor sheet there. So, and we would be inviting Middleton's youth program to buy ice from us on that side, although there's need on the north and the east side of Madison also for additional ice. So.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like we'll add this to the long list of committee of the whole discussion topics, not for January, but maybe for the next one. And in the meantime, Bill will try to track down information that we would need to have a bigger discussion about this.
Yeah, I'll follow up with the assessor. I've got a list of questions here related to that. And I would also like to work with Larry Beckler, just make sure I've got the full understanding of the original transaction and some thoughts about what potential agreement options could look like.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Have a good Thanksgiving.
Oh, you do.
Okay, moving on to resolutions. We have 2. The first one is the resolution 2023-54, approving the 2024 City of Middleton budget for all funds.
Okay. Go ahead.
Actually, why don't you? Because I was between pages. So go ahead.
Okay, Lorman will so move that. we do approve.
Okay.
Are we doing all, so, sorry.
Well, it's resolution number, the first item, resolution
Right.
2023-54.
Okay. For all funds. Sorry, that was
For all
my,
funds.
that's what I was clicking around for.
Yep.
Okay.
This is Jackson. I'll second.
Madam Chair, just a point of information, again, just as a refresher from last evening, this item includes the amendments that were made, suggested by the council in the special budget meeting last evening.
Yep. Thank you for clarifying that. All right, any further discussion?
No, not for me.
All right, hearing none, all those in favor of approving resolution 2023-54, approving the 2024 City of Middleton budget for all funds as amended last night by the council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Moving on to our second resolution, it is the resolution 2023-55, approving the levying of property taxes for the 2023 tax year, 2024 budget year. Who would like to move approval?
This is Wilkus. I move approval.
Thank you.
This is Jackson. I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion of this item? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving resolution 2023-55, approving the levying of property taxes for the 2023 tax year, 2024 budget year, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Moving on to our last item of business, it's miscellaneous ordinance to amend section 9.0510D1A and B of the Middleton ordinances relating to sanitary sewer rates. And this comes to us from the Director of Public Works.
This is Wilkus. I'll move approval of the ordinance.
And I will second that. All right, discussion. All right,
Sean, can you just give us the overview of what didn't get discussed at Public Works?
that's a lot of stuff.
Right, and I know Bill had mentioned this last night as well, but every year we go through this. The sewer utility is not subject to PSC rulemaking, like the water utility is. But we typically get an estimate from MMSD timely for including in our budget. But this year, their estimate was lower than expected. So when we got the final estimate from them very recently, we were short in what we had proposed in our budget. So that required an increase at the last minute here. But also last time we did a full rate case, they delivered to us a spreadsheet tool so that we could put in some parameters, including MMSD stuff, our own operations and our own capital improvement needs to figure out how we could continue to operate on a cash basis. So at the end of the day, annually, we've been trying to moderate rate increases without ever getting into a situation where we have a really big one in any given year. That said, MMSD's rates went up quite a bit, and ours are going to have to go up somewhat. So at the end of the day, this is what the spreadsheet tool that had been delivered to us indicated we should do to continue on cash.
Thank you. Bill.
Yeah, just wanted to add, I did go back and look at the last time the city did a full sewer rate study, and that was prepared in 2019. Our audit firm of Baker Tilly, their utility staff had prepared that for us. And as Sean had indicated, they had provided that spreadsheet tool for us to make annual adjustments. But that sewer rate study was looking at a forecast period of 2019 through 2023. So I just wanted to flag that may be something that we want to consider in 2024, perhaps in preparation for the 2025 budget, if we would want to look at an update to that full sewer rate study.
That's a good idea.
And I see Mike Meyer, our utility manager, is available in case there are any questions for him too.
I guess Mike doesn't have any comments. And does anybody else have questions about this? Okay, so Sean, make a note. Mike, make a note for next year's budget discussions, for the 2025 budget discussions. let's build in some funding for another rate study.
To update that.
Yep.
It's a good idea.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, well then, all those in favor of approving the ordinance to amend section 9.0510 D1A and B of the Middleton ordinances relating to sanitary sewer rates, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it, and we've reached the end of our agenda, so we are adjourned.